Good evening. Today we are starting off with the 10th session of this series of course. Today we are starting third chapter, and that is like the second section of the PMBOK. First section was introduction, and that included two chapters which we covered. First was the general reference to context with other terminologies within the organization surrounding the project, and the second chapter was focused on the environmental factors around the project itself without mentioning the other program portfolio and other management styles which affect project management. In the third chapter, we are going to be even more specific about project management. Here we are going to be talking about project management processes. As we indicated earlier, there are 5 process groups in which 47 processes are placed, not equally, but they are unequally distributed in these 5 process groups. The same 5 process groups, all the 47 processes in the 5 process groups could also be distributed into 10 specialized knowledge areas. We will also talk about those 10 knowledge areas, and the same 47 processes would also be distributed in them. And I'll show you how they match each other, how process groups and knowledge areas interact with each other. In this chapter, we have common project management process interactions, project management process groups. Then we talk about each one of the process groups: initiation, planning, execution, monitoring and control, and close. And then we talk a little about what is the project of information and role of knowledge areas, and ultimately the standard of project management of a project. You already understand what the project management is. We have gone through this definition twice before. And we said the project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to the project activities to meet project requirements. And we clearly understand that all this knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques must be applied only to the project activities and nothing else, because if it is being applied to anything else that is not contributive towards the project, that is not the project requirement or the project product, then that activity is a redundant activity, and such activity will waste time and money. Therefore, we strictly prohibit application of project management to any of the non-project activities. This application of knowledge requires the effective management of appropriate processes. Now, everything you do in project management, they are all defined as certain number of processes. As I said, there are about 47 processes. So these 47 processes, though are available for guideline as good practice, but they are all not mandatory. This depends upon the project manager and his team to decide which processes they want to apply in their project environment. Before we move ahead, we must first clarify what a process really means, because this term process we use at other places as well. It is not only the project management we are talking about processes, but processes are there in non-project environment as well. In an organization, we have got operations, and operation is also made up of a number of processes. Rather, those processes are grouped together into procedures, and those procedures have been standardized, and we call them standard operating procedures. So standard operating procedures are only for operations, because this is standard operating procedures. So these are the operational procedures, and they are standardized, and therefore in an organization, whatever is the SOP means standard operating procedures, that they are supposed to be followed by all. So this is purely from the perspective of the operations. And in operations, we have procedures, and within procedures, we have processes, and so on and so forth. What about projects? Why should they have processes when they are different from operations? The nature of process is continuous like operations. Although this is a very small part of the operation, but it behaves like operation. It is cyclic in nature. It is iterative in nature. You give some input to a process, it processes that information through certain tools and techniques and ultimately produces some result. And then it continues doing this process all over again and again and again. So that is very close to the definition of operations. So what do you think? How can a process apply to project? Yes, Mohsin?
Uh, sir,
How can
sir,
a
in what? Can you please like explain the question, sir?
I said process is by definition the process is cyclic in nature. It is continuous improvement, and this applies more towards operations than project because operations are cyclic in nature. They are repetitive, they are iterative, and process is a smaller part of the same operation. Process is defined in procedures and procedures are divided into processes. So process is a small little operation. So if process is applicable to operations, why should it be applicable to projects as well? The nature of project is different.
Sir, I mean, they can be applicable, but they are for the specified time period. Again, like they have uh, time limitation. They are not like forever. I guess that's
So if you do a project
as
management,
we as we
yes,
like operations are something which is going on routine. I mean, it's the task and the work we do daily basis. Obviously, in project, we do tasks and work as well. So it might not be continuous or like immortal, but obviously, I mean, it happens.
okay,
So obviously, I mean, we have to do something. I mean,
right,
that's what I want to say.
okay. So the nature of process remains the same. It is iterative in nature. If you in a project you want to do a process and that is supposed to produce a certain result, and if it doesn't produce that result, you will repeat that process and you will keep repeating it until and unless it fulfills your requirement. So that much is the continuous improvement applicable in project management, whereas in operations the process never stops. It is a never ending cyclic process, and the competitive advantage we are getting out of it is continuous improvement. And every time this cycle completes, it improves the process, it improves the procedure, it improves the operation. So that is a continuous process. But in project, because we know that project has to start from somewhere and has to end somewhere, therefore though we apply the continuous improvement within the process, but we deliberately start a process and we can deliberately stop a process when the specific targets of that process have been achieved. When the required product or deliverable has been delivered up to the satisfaction of the customer or the stakeholder, this process is no more to be repeated. But that is very different from operations, because in operations we never stop doing a process until and unless that process is altogether amended in the SOP, changed in the SOP, or it is trashed. So this is one reason. Second is, have you any idea of a subroutine? What is a subroutine?
Not exactly, but just maybe from the word itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not a routine which you always do, but you do sometimes,
Okay.
maybe with some gap.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not that continuous as the normal routine.
Okay, there is a modern term to this subroutine that is called library function. So, okay, functions or libraries or subroutines are those things which you usually come across. Actually, you are not really right about it. These are those things we usually come across. We do them as a routine, and because we do them repetitively all the time, therefore, whenever you need to apply that subroutine or the process or a function into somewhere else, in some project or somewhere else, you copy that whole thing there and you start using it. Let's take an example. If you are writing a computer program, and in that computer program you have got a quadratic equation to be used many times. So one way of doing it is that you create a code for the quadratic equation, and at every place where it is to be used, you insert that code. That means that code is written so many times in that routine. The other way, no, this will make the program very long because every time the whole thing is being repeated, and moreover, there might be a possibility of error because at one place you missed out something in the subroutine, I mean in the quadratic equation, and due to which it starts performing not according to what is expected. So there is no uniformity. You have typed it at 5 different places, and there must be some mistyping somewhere. Moreover, there is a lot of typing. Moreover, it is a very lengthy program. It is not economical. So these are the problems. Although it may function accurately, but it is anyways not economical. One way of doing it is you write this code at one place outside of the program, and whenever you need to use it, you refer it. You send data to that subroutine, and the result gets back to your program and it moves ahead. And 5 times it will be accessed and the results will be computed and the program will run. That way your program is more economical, is smaller in size, and this subroutine or a library is created which you are referring from time to time. So this is how a process behaves. When you keep doing something on regular basis, you learn that process very well, and at some other organization, maybe you want to introduce the same process, you will copy that process here, and you will, whenever you will require, you will access it, use it, and then use the benefit of that output deliverable of that process to whatever you are doing. So these processes can be used even in operations from one organization to other organization, or one department to other department. And it is also possible that processes which were basically developed for operations could be used in projects as well. I'm saying could be used. That means not all of the processes in the project could be inherited from operations. Some of them could be, and some of the processes we create anew because they have never been done before. So some processes we will create from scratch, but some processes we will copy from somewhere. Now, for example, okay, you give me an example of a process, a very simple process, a very daily life process.
So from the point of project or like operation?
Just a process, which we will see how we can use anywhere else. From the daily life, anything from the daily life.
Yeah, so it's really simple. Like for example, if we are going to, for example, cook a chicken, you know,
Right,
so like from cutting it and then putting it into onto the fire and then
right.
till the end when it's cooked. So that's a process.
Okay. How did you learn this process? From where did you learn it?
Oh, I'm sorry, what's that? From?
How did you learn this process of cooking the chicken?
Yes, from obviously obviously from someone, that maybe from my mom or someone
Okay. But you did not create it.
who already, yeah, who already knew about it.
Right. So you did not create it. You inherited it from somewhere. You learned it from somewhere
Yes,
and
yes,
you applied it. But maybe while you are doing it, you might have brought in some innovation into it. Maybe to make it more tasty, you are adding some kind of spices which no one else is doing. So what you are doing here? You are improving the process which you already know, which you have already learned or inherited from somewhere. You you have improved that process. The source from where you got this process, they do not have this improved version of the process because you improved it, right?
yes, sir.
So this is an example of continuous improvement. So based on your needs, you do that, and there are a lot many people who are cooking chicken, but everybody is not cooking chicken in the same way. Therefore, there is a disparity, and sometimes you come across a very well cooked chicken and you ask that person for the recipe. How do you do that? Why is it so tasty? So this recipe serves you, if you want to learn from it, serves you to improve your process even further. And that's how the process of cooking the chicken keeps getting improved and keeps getting standardized. Same thing happens if you are using a process which is operational in nature, but you may need to cook the same chicken while you are doing your project. In your project, you may have to, arrange food for your team, and you decide to cook the food by yourself. And from where have you brought in the process then? You have brought this process from your normal operations into the project, and you have decided to use it as such. But now it is to serve the project. So there are many organizational processes which through project governance have been imposed on us, and we are supposed to be following them in the project, and they are useful in the conduct of the process, in the conduct of the project. So I will inherit or learn some processes from operations, and I may create some certain processes within the project. So this is a general definition of how the processes can be used in project. But as I said before, each process in project will be iterative in nature. Whatever it is supposed to produce, it will try to produce. If it does not produce it according to that standard or according to those requirements of the customer, this will be sent back into the process to improvement, for improvement, and this process will be repeated till when the required results have been produced. So as soon as the required results are produced, the process will end. Whereas in operations, this process will never end. You will always keep using it. Here, we will end the process because the purpose, because the requirement which was supposed to be met has been met. So there are many kinds of processes you use in a project. Some processes are specific to the purpose of project management. They have been designed for better project management. If you want to run your project in a specific manner according to the good practices, these processes are suggested to you by PMI. These are 47 such processes, and these are only the project management processes. Many people think that these processes are enough to run a project. This is not true. You see, these are only the project management processes. They are only those processes which will help you manage your project better. What about the technical work involved in the project? What about, if you are constructing a house and you have to construct a wall, what about the processes involved in construction of the wall? Those processes are purely technical in nature and they have absolutely nothing to do with the project management. So project management processes are for the use of the project manager or his team, but the specific technical processes or for that matter some of the administrative processes or other kinds of processes will also be used in the project. So if somebody thinks that these 47 processes are enough to run a project, that is wrong. There might be many other processes which you will be actually using in your project, but these 47 processes are the project management processes. And these are the only 47 processes which are, suggested by PMI. Because if you follow these processes, there is a high chance that you will be successful in your project. It is not a guarantee, but the likelihood of your success will greatly increase. Once we will go through each one of those processes, you will understand why I am saying that. But as I said, these 47 processes are not all mandatory. It is on the project manager and his team to decide which process to do and which not to do. I'm talking about project management process only. Which processes they want to do and which they don't want to do. And they may decide to do all. They may decide that, well, we are not much involved in procurement. Maybe we don't do any of the procurement processes, but time management is more important. So all the time management processes are very important to us. So they also may decide which process they want to do in what level of detail. And they may do certain processes just on a cursory basis, just as a formality, but other processes in great detail. So this all the decision of which process to use and up to which level of rigor they want to use it, this is the decision of the project manager and his team. So project manager must consider organizational process assets and enterprise environmental factors. Once we, want to do these processes, we must look at organizational process assets and enterprise environmental factors we discussed in the last chapter. What were the organizational process assets? They were the policies, procedures, rules, regulations, formats, templates, standards, lessons learned, old files, registers, and all that. So these were mostly documentary. Whereas enterprise environmental factors were the internal and external factors, not essentially documents, but like culture, weather, and things like that, which can impact your project. So whatever process, project management process you are trying to do, remember, you will always, almost always, require both of these inputs, organizational process assets and enterprise environmental factors. You are trying to develop a project management plan, you may have to consult how the project management plan can be developed, what is the format of the project management plan, what are the previous documents which had been created in old projects as a project management plan. So you take a lot of guideline from the organizational process assets and you also consider enterprise environmental factors. What are the factors impacting me in development of project management plan? So these things, these are important to us. So both of these enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets are going to be with me for performance of each and every process. All the 47 processes, most of them, I'm saying most of them will require organizational process assets and enterprise environmental factors. So, do you have any idea why I'm saying most of them? That probably means that some of them may not require them. Do you understand that? Why?
Sir, obviously it depends on the project. I mean, everything doesn't apply 100%. You have to, I mean, and the environmental factors, or I mean, the various
Mhm.
everything is different, I mean, according to the
Right.
project.
Right. But the question remains that when I am developing a project management plan, I may be using both of these things as input, but in another process I may not be using it. What should be the reason for that? So let me explain that to you. You see, the process in the beginning of the project, like we are trying to initiate a project, we are trying to plan the project. So the processes which are required doing those things, they do not have any other input, or they do not have enough input from other sources. So they have to rely heavily on organizational process assets and enterprise environmental factors. Say once a project management plan is created, then project management plan becomes the major input into many things. Although those processes who will get project management plan as an input may require in some cases organizational process assets or enterprise environmental factors, but as we move ahead in the life of the project, the need for OPAs and EEFs starts diminishing to some extent. I'm saying to some extent because I don't want to literally say that OPS and EAFs are not required in closing or in monitoring and control. They are very much required there, but only at some places their requirement, their need is no more. Very few places. There are only few processes which do not use OPAs or EEFs, and there is a very genuine reason for not using them. But otherwise, as a general rule, I would say that if you don't remember where it is not used, just forget about it. It is not important. What is important is that all the 47 processes of project management will have some use of OPAs and EEFs. So these two inputs would probably be everywhere. In every process, they will be used as the inputs. So as I said, project team must select the appropriate processes. Out of these 47, they must select the appropriate processes required to meet the project objective. So it all depends upon the project. As you were saying, it depends upon the project. Yes, of course. Which processes to use, this is the decision project team takes. They use a defined approach that can be adopted to meet requirements. They establish and maintain the appropriate communication and engagement with the stakeholders. So whatever is more important to them. If stakeholder and communication is more important, then probably they will be more rigorous in applying those processes related to communication and stakeholders. So whatever is more important to them. They comply with the requirements to meet stakeholder needs and expectations, and ultimately they must balance the competing demand, and that is the various constraints in the project. If one constraint occurs, then it will affect many other constraints. If you change the scope, the time, cost, quality, and lot many things could be disturbed. So you always have to balance this competing demand and adjust according to the changes. Okay, now let us look at what I was trying to define earlier. These are not only the project management processes which are required in project management. As I said, the project management process ensures the effective flow of the project throughout its life cycle. This is the management of the project. It encompasses those tools and techniques involved in applying skills and capabilities described in the knowledge areas, the specialized knowledge areas. This is specific to that. It is not specific to the product oriented work. That would be other set of processes. So it will differ from project to project. In a construction project, the product oriented processes would be different, and in an IT project, they would be different. So if somebody thinks that only the project management processes are enough to do any project, that is not right. But yes, project management processes may apply to every project. But at the same time, every project will have its own set of product-oriented processes. So what do? They specify and create the project's product. They produce the items according to the requirement, typically defined by the project life cycle. Because when we talked about project life cycle, you remember I said it is not the process groups. Project life cycle is how the actual project is going to happen. How are you going to bifurcate it or segment it into various phases, and those should be surgically separate sequential phases. So those sequential phases would actually be doing the product oriented work. Every phase would have a deliverable to deliver, certain requirements to meet. So every phase is a mini project. And all the project management processes, all the 47 project management processes will, or you can say they may apply to every phase. So in every phase, you have to decide which are the project management processes you want to use in this process and to what degree of rigor. So they vary by application area as well as the phase of the product life cycle. Scope of the project cannot be defined without basic understanding how to create the specified, uh, just a minute, product. All right. Okay. From the point of view of PMBOK, PMBOK does not cover product-oriented processes. It cannot. If all the product-oriented processes in all kinds of projects had to be accommodated in PMBOK, then it would be having the full knowledge of construction and full knowledge of IT and full knowledge of every kind of project in the world, which is not possible. We are trying to find some generic practices, generic processes, which are applicable to all the projects, and they are for the management of the project. Therefore, all the processes given in PMBOK are only project management processes. They are not product-oriented processes. Product-oriented processes, although they are necessary, they have to be used in every project, but from the perspective of PMBOK guide, those product-oriented processes are not covered in this standard, and they are outside the scope of this standard. But again and again we are saying we should not ignore them. We should not think that they are unnecessary and they are not to be done. They will also have to be done. Project management processes and product-oriented processes overlap and interact throughout the life of a project. But we leave this to the project management team, how they overlap and interact with these processes. So when you are doing a project, it is not only the matter of 47 processes, but it could be many, many more processes actually being used on a project.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, I cannot see the slide.
Okay, just a minute. You got disconnected as well.
Sir, I thought there was something wrong at my end, so I just refreshed.
Okay.
Yeah, now I can see.
Okay. So I was talking about in scope and out of scope. All the project management processes which are generic in nature and they relate to the management of the project, such processes, 47 processes, are in scope of this standard project management body of knowledge. But the product-oriented processes are outside the scope of this standard. But at the same time, as I said, they should not be ignored, because project management processes and product-oriented processes, they have to work together. They have to overlap, they have to interact throughout the life of the project, and therefore we cannot say that we can run a project just based on the project management processes. A project cannot be run just based on these 47 processes. This is why I'm insisting so much, is because lot many things people think that now they have become a PMP, they can run any kind of project in the world. You just know the project management processes. If you go into say performance of a nuclear project, then probably you don't know the product oriented processes of a nuclear project, and therefore that knowledge has to be married up with the knowledge of the project management, and those processes and these processes will have to overlap and interact if you really want to do that project. Good practice we have already defined. All these 47 processes, how they are to be done is defined here. What they are and how they are to be done, it is defined here. If you do them according to this standard, then you are following the good practice. Not the best practice, but the good practice. Right? So it all depends upon you whether you feel the need to use a specific process or you don't. You may say that this process is not really applicable to me, so I'm not using. This is just your will and wish, because none of the processes given in standard are mandatory for you. But if you do them, that will enhance your chances of success. That is a general statement, that by following the project management processes, it has been shown that they will enhance your chances of success over a wide range of projects. So this is recommended, this is preferable if you can somehow use as many good practices as possible, follow as many project management processes as possible. But if you feel that that is not the requirement of your project, the final decision is held with the project team. Okay, now after having learned that, we now understand that simply by applying the knowledge, skills, and processes described should always be applied uniformly on all the projects. That does not really happen. You cannot make it a template. These are the 47 processes, and I will use these processes on every project exactly in the same way, and I will have assured success. Not at all. You have to pick and choose, looking at the requirement of your project. Accommodate these processes according to your project, and you have to rewrite the criteria of success for your project. For any given project, the project manager, in collaboration with the project team, is always responsible for determining which processes are appropriate. Not all, but specifically which processes are appropriate for this project, and the appropriate degree of rigor for each process. Which process has to be done in what level of detail, what degree of rigor. Maybe one process you want to do in a lot of detail and another process you just want to touch upon. This all depends upon you, but please, as a project manager and as a team member, you must not think for your own benefit, doing things which are easier for you, but look at the benefit of the project. So all your efforts must be focused on the project. So whatever you decide, whichever process you decide to pick would be fine. It is an integrative undertaking. Project management and the product-oriented processes. Project management is an integrative undertaking that requires each project and product process to be appropriately aligned and connected with other processes to facilitate coordination. Actually, whatever processes you select, these 47 processes, maybe you pick them all, there are say 70 other processes of product oriented, they all have to marry up in such a way that they have a cohesive and well connected mechanism. They are properly aligned with each other. They are, properly justified. The processes should just not exist for the sake of existing, but they must have a purpose. So project management processes and product-oriented processes must integrate properly. Actions taken during one process typically affect that process and other related processes. If we do not perform well in a process, the subsequent processes or other processes which are being affected by it will be affected. These process interactions often require trade-offs among project requirements and objectives. So once we start interacting, these processes start interacting, so certain requirements rise from here, that there are certain requirements for the interaction which may make certain processes unnecessary and certain processes more important than others. So that is exactly why we say that all the processes may not be applicable to you for every project, and they have to be balanced out according to the need of the project. Actively manages these interactions to meet sponsor, customer, and other stakeholder requirements. Sometimes a process is a set of processes will need to be iterated several times in order to achieve the required outcome. When we plan, we say, okay, we'll do this process and this will be the result. But you see, we are doing a project and we are not sure that the result we are expecting would be produced from this process or not. What if it doesn't? We may have to reiterate that process, we have to redo that process, and we will improve that process, and we will try the result to be desired result to be produced, and we will keep repeating that process and improving that process till the time the desired result is achieved, and then this process will finish. Project exist within an organization and do not operate in a closed system. So project by itself is not a system in itself, but this has to follow a lot many guidelines, governance mechanisms, and other OPAs. So it is under the organization. So a lot many inputs would be coming from the organization or from the outside world, and that is through the OPAs and EEFs, and deliver capabilities back to the organization. So we take input, lot many input from the organization, and once we deliver our product, we give it back to the organization. The project processes may generate information to improve the management of future projects and organizational process assets. So once this project of ours will finish, it will leave some lessons learned for the future projects. They will be populated into the organizational process assets. The library will then contain our data as well, and that will be used by future projects. PMBOK guide describes the nature of project management processes in terms of their integration, their interaction, and the purpose they serve. So each and every process will be discussed in detail in the remaining course, and we will talk about how do these processes integrate with each other, what is produced from one process and what is given to the other process, and why it should interact with which process, and what is really the purpose of each process. So all these things will be thoroughly studied. Project management processes are grouped into 5 categories, which project management process groups. These are initiating process group, planning process group, executing process group, monitoring and controlling process group, and closing process group. So in initiating process group, what we do, we perform to define a new project or a phase of an existing project by obtaining authorization to start the project or the phase. So this is the initiation where the project is initiated. The order to initiate the project, the authorization is given to the project manager. And moreover, this also comes into play when we have to start a phase. For every phase, we have to initiate it. Again, an authorization is created and a charter is developed for that. The charter is not only for the whole project, but it is for every phase we have to create a separate charter. Planning process group. This process requires to establish the scope of the project, refine the objectives, define the course of action required to attain the objectives that the project was undertaken to achieve. In whole, this is the complete process of planning everything in detail. As much detail as you can go, as you can conceive, as you can think, and as much time you can devote to planning. This is all done in planning. Once your project management plan is complete, then you see, I did mention standard operating procedure in reference to operations. What do we do in operations? We follow strictly the standard operating procedures, because if we don't do that, that would be considered a crime. If a subordinate, if an employee in an organization does not follow SOPs, he will be punished. But in projects, we don't have any SOPs because these are not operations. But then where are our processes and procedures? Our processes and procedures are in the project management plan. So this is as important as a SOP for operations. So project management plan, if I say this is kind of a SOP for project, that would be okay, but I don't want to use the word SOP because SOP specifically means something for operations. So as SOP is for the operation, so is the project management plan for the project. That means that once a project management plan is properly authorized and approved and created, then in execution we are just supposed to follow whatever is written in the project management plan. We cannot deviate from project management plan. Execution is just the performance of the project management plan. Perform to complete the work defined in the project management plan to satisfy the project specifications. You know, once we planned the project, we had the project specifications in mind. So we planned the project in such a way that if it is done in this sequence, in this order, then it will yield the desired results. So as far as execution is concerned, they have no right to do anything what is not written in project management plan. They have to blindly follow project management plan. Okay, this might be very cynical, but this is the truth. In execution, hum, mm, we don't do it like that. We don't plan actually. We don't give enough time to planning, and we do only ad hoc planning, broad planning, outline, high level planning, and we just jump into execution. So once we do not have a very good plan, then definitely we have nothing to execute. So we have just approximations to execute. So we start working on those approximations and we get stuck. And wherever we get stuck, there is a problem, we try to resolve that problem and move ahead. We are not fixing the whole plan. We are just fixing the problem area and then we move ahead. Then we again get stuck, again resolve that problem and then move ahead. So in a way, you are continuously planning in execution, but at the same time, you are not even yielding any good results because the whole plan is not being was not created and is not being amended accordingly. So what should be ideally happening? In execution, we should not be planning. We should just be executing. We should just be performing. And while we are executing, there is another process group which should be active, which should be running, and that is monitoring and control. This is the responsibility of monitoring and control to analyze how execution is going on. Is there anything to be changed? If execution feels there is something to be changed, execution can submit its request to monitoring and control. It is called change request. But by itself, execution has absolutely no right to change anything on its own. Monitoring and control is the thinking mind which not only listens to all the change requests, but also does its own analysis, and based on that analysis suggests certain change request by itself. And that results in amendment to the project management plan. Once a change request is approved, the project management plan is amended accordingly and it is sent back to execution as if they know what changes have been made and what is the new shape of the project management plan and what are they going to perform in the remaining portion of the project. So that essentially means that execution and monitoring and control must be going in parallel. If there is something wrong, we go back to execution and fix it. Again, we analyze it in monitoring and control. If there is still something wrong, we again send it back to execution to fix it. Until and unless that is fixed and the requirements are met, we will continue on this journey. And when all the requirements are met, the deliverable is according to the specifications, all the work which had to happen has been completed successfully. That is the point when we cannot go back to execution any further. That is the time when we have to move on to the closing of the project. We have achieved what we had to achieve. Now we submit our results to closing process group, which is responsible for a closing audit and which puts everything in order. It ensures that all the work has been done, all the deliverables are available to be handed over to the customer, and all the lessons learned, organizational process assets and historical data and everything is to be handed over to the to be populated in the organizational process assets. So closing is the last process group where everything culminates. Right. So are you okay till now? Any questions?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. After this, we'll move on to the project management processes interactions, which we just talked about, that there is a lot of interaction. Now, we'll only talk about the project management processes and their interaction. I'm not going to talk about the interaction of project management processes with the product-oriented process because I have already said that product-oriented processes are not given in this standard. So, as far as PMI is concerned and PMP certification is concerned, you must be master of the project management processes and you must understand these interactions. The project management processes are presented as discrete elements and with well-defined interfaces. Every process is a unit in itself. This is discrete in nature. It is well-defined and it interfaces with something else. Whatever is being output from one process is to be used by someone else, some other process. In practice, all these processes, 47 processes, they have a lot of interaction. They overlap and interact in ways that are not completely detailed in this document. So there could be any type of connection which could be created. Although we will try to define all the interactions as best as we can, but there could be many other interactions you can invent out of it. Most experienced project management practitioners recognize there is more than one way to manage a project. Therefore, these processes could be used in any way, in any combination, in any sequence. So the sequence given here is not cast in stone. The required process groups and their processes are guides for applying appropriate project management knowledge and skills during the project. You see, PMI is just providing you a guideline, is just directing you in a specific direction. It is not something which is mandatory to you. It is not instructional from that point of view that you have to abide by them in all conditions. No. This leaves everything on you. You are independent to think whatever you want to think with respect to your project and pick and choose whatever processes and their interactions you want to have. Application of the project management processes is iterative and many processes are repeated during the project. And I have defined that why a process is repeated. Because that process did not produce the required results and there has to be repeated for improving its results. So there is an element of continuous improvement here, but this continuous improvement stops when you have produced the desired result. It cannot go on forever. This is not infinite in nature. So process improvement within a project is finite, whereas process improvement from operational point of view, this is infinite. The integrative nature of project management requires monitoring and controlling process group to interact with the other process groups. So monitoring and controlling, as we were saying that execution and monitoring and control were happening together, it was not only execution and monitoring and control. Monitoring and control was actually involved in planning also. So for all practical aspects, when something is changing, the planning is changing, project management plan is changing, therefore the planning process is being iterated. All the work we have done in planning would have to be revised here. Whether you want to call it a planning process or you want to say the planning is happening in monitoring and control, this is one and the same thing. But for all practical purposes, this is the cycle: planning, execution, monitoring and control. And this relates to the damming cycle. Damming cycle is the cycle of continuous improvement, and this is extracted from the name of Edward Deming, who actually invented it. According to Deming cycle, there are four portions of that cycle: plan, do, check and act. Plan, do, check and act. We call it PDCA cycle also. So PDCA cycle is iterative in nature. Once you plan something, I'm talking about operations. I'm not specifically talking about project. PDCA is for operations. So when you plan a process, you do according to that. You actually go into the execution of that. Then you check your results, make amendments and act upon that. So this completes the cycle: check, plan, do, check and act. Once this cycle is complete for the first time, some improvement will be coming to the process. If you repeat this cycle, some more improvement will be coming to the process. And this is infinite in nature, because every time you improve the process, some improvement will be there. Although I do agree that the improvement for the very first time could be very noticeable. The second time it could be even lesser than the previous time, and this keeps reducing, but nobody can say that there is no more benefit out of it. There could be very, very little ministerial kind of benefit we are getting out of it, but yes, it is a continuous cycle and that will keep improving the process till infinity. Another reason for that is maybe your process is can improve up to one on a scale from 1 to 100. You are currently at level 20. First time you will try to improve this process, maybe you improve your process from 20 to 60. Next time it won't be this big a jump because there were a lot many things wrong which you fixed. Now it is difficult to identify the remaining flaws. It cannot be as many flaws as they were earlier. So next time you improve, maybe you reach from 60 to 80. In the next cycle, you reach from 80 to 90. Next cycle, you reach from 90 to 92. And you see this number keeps decreasing. And ultimately you reach a place where the improvement is almost negligible, but it's still there is improvement. At that point, if somebody thinks that improvement has reached its optimum, that is wrong. Actually, you have reached the limit of logic. The knowledge available with you are within, within the surroundings in which you survive. That knowledge is limited to that improvement. This is a time to think beyond, think out of the box. And if you start thinking out of the box, you may break this false barrier, this glass ceiling, and you then find a whole set of opportunities available to you to improve. Maybe this glass ceiling is broken, and then you see another glass ceiling on top, another 100 points above you. Again, you make a big improvement. You improve at this point from 0 to 70. And so on. You keep improving, you keep breaking the glass ceilings, you keep improving, and this is infinite in nature, because knowledge, all the knowledge has yet not been explored. Many things which were thought earlier not to be possible are today possible. So today what you are thinking is impossible, that you cannot break this glass ceiling, that is just your thought. It is just the power of your mind. If you can think beyond your barriers, then probably you can break this glass ceiling. So continuous improvement is possible in operations all the time. But in projects, we don't want the infinite process improvement. We only want to meet the customer needs and requirements, and those requirements have been defined, and our process is only to achieve that requirement level. As soon as it achieves that, the process will stop iterating and will deliver. That's it. So monitoring and controlling will always happen in the background, while planning and execution, you will find that they are iterating. So this is the cycle which I just talked about. Um, Actually, inside this cycle, you see planning, execution, monitoring, and control, which directly relates with the PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, and act, which directly relates with it. And this is iterative in nature and looks like an infinite cycle. But there is an entry point and exit point from this. Initiation process group actually serves to initiate this cycle. And closing process is when all the requirements have been met, then it serves to close this process. That's why projects have a finite duration. They start at some point and they finish at some point, always. Project management process groups are linked by the outputs which are produced. So that output will be going to some other process as an input. The process groups are seldom either discrete or one-time events. Process groups are repetitive in nature. They are overlapping. They have got overlapping activities that occur throughout the project. Output of one process generally becomes an input to another process and is a deliverable of the project, sub-project, or the project phase. Deliverables are at the sub-project or project level may be called incremental deliverables. You see, the deliverable of a phase or a sub-project or whatever is a part of the main deliverable, that is an increment to the deliverable. Ultimately, we will get the end product. So this thing has been made amply clear that these process groups do not happen in a sequence. You do not start doing planning after the initiation, because initiation will continue. Initiation of the project, initiation of the phases, and that will go on. Therefore, while the initiation is going on, planning is going on. So the diagram underneath this shows the cycles in the life cycle of the project, how initiation behaves. Initiation takes its peak and it goes down, it almost takes 1/4 of the project time. Planning process group is, at the peak, while the execution, when planning is happening, planning is being updated, execution is also happening. Monitoring and control is also happening. Closing processes are also happening. So they all can overlap and they all can happen simultaneously. So these process groups should not be called as the phases. That is one of the main reasons that they are not called the phases. So in this diagram, I have enlarged this thing. You can see these cycles, and this is just a proof from my side that these 5 process groups are not the phases, because they have a lot of overlap and they cannot be done in a sequence. Yes.
Sir, one question here.
Mhm.
The planning is just, obviously it should be for the process improvement, right? I mean, it's not the actual planning we did initially.
Yes, of course. Actually, planning started at that point when we, after the initiation, when we started making a plan. We made our detailed plan, and that was the project management. We spent quite a bit of time in that, and when we were doing that, we were not doing anything else. Then we decided that this is the final plan and we should get into the execution. Once we got into the execution, during the execution, we found a lot many things which were not exactly right in the plan, and that was due to the uncertainty, due to the risk, due to poor knowledge on our end while we were planning. So we found a lot many things which need to be improved. So through change request, monitoring and control serves to replan those things. So although the replanning effort may not be as big as the initial planning effort, but replanning will continue, will go on, and every time replanning will result in an updated project management plan. And that updated project management plan will be sent back to execution for execution purposes. And that cycle will continue until and unless all the requirements of the project have been met. And only then can we close.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you.
Now, if you can look at this chart, this is also available in, do you have the PMB okay?
Uh, yes, sir. I downloaded it already.
Okay. So you might find this chart there as well. I did mention 10 knowledge areas and 5 process groups. And I also said that the 47 processes can be divided into 5 process groups, as well as they can be divided into 10 knowledge areas. Now, how does that happen? If we put all the process groups as columns, 5 columns, and the knowledge areas as 10 rows, then at their intersection, we can see which are the processes which are part of that knowledge area or that process group. Okay, let's forget about the knowledge areas for now. Just look at the columns. Initiation. Look at the column of initiation. What are the processes given underneath it? Is it readable to you?
Sir, it's pretty small, but I can try. It says develop project charter.
Right. So it is develop project charter. If
Yeah,
I
now it's better.
if I can go down on that, in the last knowledge area, we have identify stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
We have identified stakeholders. So that means that we have got only 2 processes in initiation. We have only 2 processes in initiation. I'm not talking about knowledge areas right now. We have only 2 processes in initiation. One is called develop project charter and the other is called identify stakeholders. No other knowledge area has any process which belongs to initiation. As far as the develop project charter process is concerned, that relates to the project integration knowledge area. The identify stakeholder process relates to the project stakeholder management knowledge area. So here you can find the interaction, although from the name of the process also you can deduce what knowledge area it belongs to. But if you don't, then this chart can be very helpful to you. Now looking at the planning, in planning you will observe that all the 10 knowledge areas are represented here. When we are doing planning, everything is being planned. Everything is being planned. Scope, in front of scope you see 4 processes. So there are 4 processes of scope planning. Then we have got 6 processes for schedule planning, 3 processes for cost planning, and so on and so forth. So there are almost 24 processes in planning, and so in so much detail these processes are being planned here, and the highest number of processes is existing in this planning process group. But we have 47 total processes, out of which 24 processes are in planning process group. That would show you the importance of planning. It's almost more than half of the processes exist in planning. So a very thorough planning is required for each and every knowledge area. Do you understand this point?
Yes, sir. So is this the chart which they say like you have to memorize, or?
Yes, they do say, but I don't really agree with the statement. Yes, this is a very important chart. You must understand this chart very carefully, but memorizing it is foolish. That is, you don't need to memorize it. But actually, if you will understand it, you will be able to recreate it by yourself. You must understand the logic
Okay.
and how these processes are located. Okay,
Okay, sir.
so you have seen lot many processes in planning. In execution, we don't have that many processes. There are certain knowledge areas which have no process for execution. Like scope has no process for execution, time has no process for execution, cost has no process for execution, and the risk has no process for execution. Out of the 10 knowledge areas, 4 knowledge areas do not have any execution process. Only 6 knowledge areas have their processes in execution. But even here, we can see that all the knowledge areas have one process in execution. Exception is human resource management. In human resource management, we have 3 processes. Therefore, that speaks that there is something special about human resource happening in execution. I'll talk about it. Then is monitoring and control. We have got processes of control against every knowledge area, but the exception is human resource management. There is no monitoring and control process for human resource management. Closing, we have only 2 processes, just like in initiation. One is from integration, close project or phase, and one is from procurement, close procurements. No other knowledge area has any process to be closed. Now we will define why these things are set up like this. Let's get back to initiation. There are only 2 processes. What are you supposed to be doing in initiation? You are supposed to be initiating the project. You are supposed to be authorizing the project. You are supposed to be developing a project charter and giving it to the project manager. So project manager has to be assigned here, and the project manager is being given the charter. And at that time, there is a little responsibility of project manager in initiation, once he receives the charter, he clarifies the charter. He asks his sponsor certain questions to clarify his mind. And to further clarify, he looks around. He doesn't start planning as such. He looks around and sees who all are the stakeholders, as if he knows who will he be consulting with while he is planning. These two steps are enough to initiate the project. First is the development of the project charter, and then is the identification of stakeholders. Armed with the charter and a stakeholder list, project manager enters the planning process group. And here, as I said before, there is a thorough planning of each and every knowledge area. And I must mention here that integration is the father of all knowledge areas. This is responsible for integration of all the other 9 knowledge areas. No matter what process group it is, integration is always the boss. And it has to have some kind of process in integration in every process group. Now look at integration and look at the row in front of it. It has a process in initiation, a process in planning, a process in execution, 2 processes in monitoring and control, and 1 in closure. So it has a process everywhere. Look at other knowledge areas. None of the other knowledge areas have presence everywhere. You see, scope is present in planning and monitoring. Time has the same. Cost is also the same. Quality is present in planning, execution, and monitoring and control. HR is present in planning and execution, not even in monitoring and control. And so on and so forth. Even you look at the last 2, procurement is not there in initiation, it is there in the remaining 4 process groups. Stakeholder is there in the first 4 process groups but not in closing, which is the knowledge area which is present in all the process groups. Integration. Why? Because this is in charge of all the process groups. So if you talk about initiation, the integration process is in charge. Develop project charter is in control. And a subordinate kind of process is identify stakeholder. In planning, the main purpose is to develop a project management plan. And everything else happening in other knowledge areas during planning is actually to populate or enrich the project management plan. Everything is contributing to the project management plan. All the work being done in scope, in time, in cost, quality, in all the knowledge areas is actually contributing to the project management plan, which is being integrated as a whole. And that whole is going to be executed in execution. So direct and manage project work in execution means that this is the controlling process which will actually execute the project management plan, including all the other plans, right? That means the scope, time, and cost will be executed as a whole, not separately. That is exactly the reason scope, time, and cost do not have any process by themselves for execution, because they have been integrated into the project management plan, and that is being executed in direct and managed project work, and scope is being fulfilled, time is being spent, cost is being spent. So everything is happening in execution. If that be the case, then why other knowledge areas have some processes in execution? There is a reason for everything. We have in front of quality assurance. In monitoring and control, we have quality control. And in planning, we have plan quality management. So what happens is, when we are planning the quality, a quality management plan was created, which defined how the quality of this project will be assured and how it will be controlled. Now, as far as assurance is concerned, assurance has to deal with the processes and control has to deal with the deliverable. Processes are happening in execution, and assurance can only be useful if it is working on ongoing processes. Because if there is something wrong with the process, quality assurance has a mechanism to improve it. Continuous improvement process will happen here. Quality assurance can find bugs, it can find problems in the processes and fix them. This is quality assurance job. That is why, although the project is being executed by direct and managed project work, but the processes being executed are assured here. That is the reason why quality assurance has to be there in execution. I'll talk about control later. As far as human resource is concerned, there is a unique story here. People generally are more worried about the human resource. Who is writing the report of these people? How these people are being controlled? So people think that the human resource also needs to be monitored and controlled, which as a thought is not wrong, but it is not the purpose of the project management to monitor and control the people. Project is to deal with a product and through some processes. If you can give this assurance to monitoring and control that all the work has been completed and all the deliverables have been delivered, then monitoring and control does not want to interfere in anything else. As far as human resource is concerned, human resource is the business of execution. The people are taken on board during the execution. They are put on job during the execution. They are treated during the execution. They are paid during the execution. They are reported upon during the execution by their supervisors. So as such, human resource is not to be managed in monitoring and control. All the dealing with the human resource starts and finishes in execution by the relevant supervisor or the HR manager, whatever. So there is no role of human resource in monitoring and control. Actually, what happens is, whatever these human resource will perform, that will be work, and that work performance would be sent as a data to monitoring and control, which will analyze that work, not the human beings, but the work they have done. And if the work is not done right, then naturally some change request will be moved and that report will be sent back to execution, the work performance report, that that specific work was not done well. Now it is the responsibility of execution to find out who did that job and if that person has to be credited or punished or coached. This is the responsibility of the execution. So for all practical purposes, monitoring and control as a process group does not deal with the human resources. Execution is responsible for all dealings. So you see, it acquires the resource, it develops the resource, and it manages the resource. Communication, we developed a communication management plan and planning, and we are going to control it in monitoring and control. What are you managing here? Managing communication means information distribution. What all communications you planned will be implemented. Naturally, they know through a project management plan what all are the communications and who is responsible for what. Why are we putting a managed communication process there? That is because of the reason that we want to ensure that all the communications are actually happening when they are happening. So this also is a work which can only be observed when it is happening. Ongoing work, ongoing communications. So if something is not going right, if some communication is lacking, that managed communication will eradicate that problem and will intimate the relevant people to start that communication. Now coming over to the risk, we don't have any process in execution as far as the risk is concerned. Why is it so? Risk has a very unique characteristic. Risk is an uncertainty. It is a probability of something happening. But we are not sure that this will happen. Although in planning, we planned it in a lot of detail. We developed a risk management plan, we identified the risks, we quantified and qualified, did a lot of analysis on it, and then we created different risk responses. But in execution, what will this do? In execution, we only do what we have to do. And what we have to do is given in the project management plan. And project management plan says this activity is to be done, then this activity is to be done. Risk is something which may happen. So we cannot include it in execution. When it will happen, we will check it, we will monitor it in monitoring and control, and we will control the risk from there. If this risk happens or is about to happen, then monitoring and control will invoke the contingency plan, amend the project management plan, and tell the execution in direct and managed project execution to do that job that would cater the risk. But as such, risk itself does not do anything in execution. But control risk is responsible to keep an eye on all the risks which have been identified. As far as the procurement is concerned, when we are initiating the project, we do not know that it will be further outsourced because we have not yet planned by ourselves. Once we have gone through the planning process, we would know which of the jobs we can do ourselves and which is the job which has to be outsourced. Therefore, we plan for procurements in planning. Initiation has nothing to do with it. In execution, we award those contracts to the selected bidders. This is our execution of the procurement. We are not actually conducting or executing that contract, but we are actually giving away the contract. That is our execution. And once the contractor starts working on the project, we control procurements in monitoring and control. And we ensure that contractor is working exactly according to the contract we have signed with him. Why is it necessary to have a closed procurement process? Because this is a portion of the project which has been outsourced. And before we can close our project, we have to be sure that all the procurements have successfully been completed. There is nothing outstanding, no money to be paid anywhere, everything is settled and adjusted. So procurements have also to be closed before we can close the project itself. As far as the stakeholders are concerned, as you remember in initiation, I said after you have understood the charter, you look around and you try to identify who all are the people who will be affected by this project, and you try to identify them, analyze them. This is called identify stakeholders, and that is in initiation because of its need. In planning, we will develop a detailed project stakeholder management plan. In execution, we will, just like in communication, we will manage these stakeholder engagements, and in monitoring and control, we will control these stakeholder engagements. So this is how all the 47 processes interact with each other. But this is just theoretically I have discussed with you. I'll show it show it to you in a diagrammatic fashion as well. So far, is there any doubt? Is it okay with you, or you lost me?
No, sir, it's fine. I mean, it's understandable how the things are like divided.
Wonderful.
It's fine, sir. Yes.
Okay. Now let us move on to the diagrammatical layout and see how actually these things are happening. Again, this is a very small print, but you have to go on with it. I'll read it out to you whenever required. On this diagram, you can see there are some gray boxes which represent the process groups. Let me point to those. Okay, can you see the pointer? Yep.
Yes. Yes.
So this is the initiation process group. This is the planning process group. This is the execution process group. This is the monitoring and control. This is long one. This is the monitoring and control process group. And this is the closing process group. All the 5 process groups. We are not going to talk about the processes included in these process groups right now, but we are trying to establish the interlinkages or interactions amongst these process groups. Okay, then we have got some boxes, external boxes like these. This is the initiator or the project sponsor. He is coming from outside into the initiating process group. Then we have got, and what he is bringing along? The sponsor is bringing along 3 items. I'll just read it out to you. Project statement of work, business case, and agreements. These are the 3 things he is bringing along from outside. He is entering into the project in initiation process group. What else? We have got another external box named enterprise oblique organization. So there are some things which are coming from the organization side. If you look on top of it, there are 2 items written here: organizational process assets and enterprise environmental factors. These are coming from the organization. And they are going where? They are going to initiation process group, they are going to planning process group, they are going to execution, monitoring and control, and close. So that means that organizational process assets and enterprise environmental factors are being input into all the process groups. That means that if not every, but most of the processes in every process group would have organizational process assets and enterprise environmental factors as their input. That is an established fact. Then we have a box for customer. We are getting requirements from the customer in planning, and customer and our organization have some teaming agreements which are also required by us in planning. Then we have seller, that is our subcontractor. We will award him the contract because he has proposed to us seller proposal, bids. He will submit the bids and we will accept one of the many sellers and we will award him the contract. The awarded contract and the selected seller, the name of those things and this document would be sent to the monitoring and control. Then we have another strange box, which is project documents. So these are all the project documents which are being created from the planning and shared with execution and monitoring and control. And two-way arrows means that they can be updated also. So probably I have defined all the boxes. Let me define what these lines mean. We have lines with two colors. One are the black lines. Black lines, you will see that they will show the interaction between the process groups only. If there is a line from one process group to other, that is black. Here to here, here to here, here to here. So these are the lines from one process group to the other. So all the interactions amongst the process groups are shown with a black line. Gray lines show interaction of all the process groups with outside entities. These are all shown in gray. If you are getting organizational process assets and enterprise environmental factors from enterprise, it should be coming to the initiation through a gray arrow. Sponsor is bringing along statement of work, business case and agreement through a gray arrow. So all the gray arrows are with the external entities or other entities. Process groups are interlinked through the black arrows. Okay, that much is clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let us start from the top and see how this interaction starts. Just hold on a minute. Okay. You see on the top, the whole story starts with the project sponsor. Project sponsor must have been assigned by the organization we are serving in. Our organization has assigned this person as a project sponsor or the project director to the project. And once they assigned him in this position, they must have already decided that this is the project to be done. So basically, the business case, if this is a project given to us through some agreement or contract, that has already been done, business case is already existing, statement of work is already with us, so he has been given these things and he has been told to start the project, to authorize the project. So he gets into the initiation process group armed with these three inputs. Now before I can proceed ahead, can you tell me what is the project statement of work?
Sir, not really sure.
Okay, okay. Okay, let me tell you. Normally people mix it with scope of work. This is not the scope of work. Project statement of work is created by the customer. Let us assume that this project has been awarded to our organization by the customer. And that customer, when he decided to outsource this project, he would have created a statement of work. This is a brief statement which just outlines what is to be done. Though some people can say that this is the scope, yes, up to some extent this is the scope, but this is a very high level scope. He just gives you an idea what is to be done. And definitely some high level scope is also given in the statement of work. But remember that this is created when someone decides not to do a job by themselves and to outsource it. You will also be doing the same in procurement. But this is not us, this is the customer who decided that this job he can't do himself. So this has to be outsourced. And when he decided that, the very first thing he must have done is to have created the statement of work. In absence of statement of work, it is impossible to create further documentation like request for proposals, RFQs, RFPs, and so on and so forth. All those documents, this is the base document for them. Without existence of a statement of work, those documents could not have been created. So once this statement is existing, the customer might have developed those documents, might have advertised in the newspapers or whatever. We as an organization must have felt that we should be bidding on this project. So we created a business case. Why should we be the one to get this project? If the business case was feasible, then we did bid for the project and we did win it. And once we won it, we got into a contract with the customer, and that is this agreement. So out of the whole process I just described to you, we have three things: project statement of work created by the customer, business case developed by our organization, and when we were trying to bid for that. And we also may consider the business case of the customer. But this is our business case. Why are we getting this project? And agreement is a final contract between us and the customer. So these documents contain a lot of detail. They actually explain what is to be done. And project sponsor brings these three documents into initiation. And till this point in time, he is the only person in the project. No one else has been hired so far. So the whole responsibility of the project is on the head of project sponsor till the time he delegates it to someone else like project manager. So the authorization he will be creating would be given to a newly nominated project manager, and that authorization is called a project charter. And that project charter will authorize the project manager to mobilize the resources to do the project. So in initiation, sponsor will create the charter. In some of the cases, it is assumed or it is considered or thought that the charter is developed by the project manager, which is a wrong statement. This is not the responsibility of project manager to create the charter. This is the responsibility of project sponsor. In most of the cases, project manager even do not exist when charter is being created. But sometimes the project sponsor already knows who will be the project manager. And maybe this person had been involved in the bidding process and earlier work of the project, which when the project was yet not started. So he had some clue what is happening. So maybe he has been earmarked to become the project manager. Now if sponsor asks him to help in create the charter, he may help him. Or if project manager has been assigned, a new project manager has been assigned, and he is asked by the sponsor to help in creation of the charter, he may help him. But as such, it is not the responsibility of project manager to create the charter. Responsibility remains with the project sponsor, and he is the signing and authorizing authority. If I as a project manager am creating this charter for the project sponsor, I will ensure that it is his words, his commands which I am writing in the charter. And I am not writing anything from my side. And secondly, he signs that document. I don't sign that document. Project manager does not sign the project charter as the author. Once this charter has been authorized and is being given to the project manager. Now, I have already told you that project sponsor may have a project board sitting behind him. He may take this project charter to the project board and maybe get its approval or whatever they want to say. Maybe project board members also sign on it, but essentially project sponsor must sign on it. Project manager has no capacity to sign this document except to receive that letter. When he receives the charter, he may sign that he has received it, not as an author. Okay, this is happening in initiation. Project charter has been given to the project manager. Project manager may have certain queries. He clarifies, gets them clarified from the project sponsor. And then before he starts planning, he starts looking around for the stakeholders. And that is important. We should not straightaway jump into the work of the project. Rather, we should look at the needs and expectations of all those who are going to be the stakeholders of the project. So I must identify who are the stakeholders. So I will identify and I will analyze those stakeholders. This is done in initiation. So once I created the charter and now I have created the stakeholder register containing the complete list of all the stakeholders and also a stakeholder management strategy. I have grouped, analyzed and grouped the stakeholders in various groups and I have devised a strategy to deal with each group. This is my stakeholder management strategy. Now these three documents, project charter, stakeholder register and stakeholder management strategy are coming from initiation to planning. Right? Now, just to give you an example of how a process may look like. In initiation, we have developed charter process. What are the inputs to develop charter? Just have a look at it. All these three items are the input to the charter. These two items are the input to the charter. These are the 5 items which are input to the charter and the output from the charter is the charter. And that charter would get into the identify stakeholders and naturally enterprise environment reflector process assets will also be input to the stakeholder identification and the output would be stakeholder register and management strategy. So these things are coming to the planning. I think I should describe from planning onwards tomorrow because we are almost up with the time. So if you have any question about whatever we have discussed today, you can ask now.
No, sir. It's pretty much clear. I just need to, because I've been really busy last week. I couldn't revise all the things. I just need to revise them,
Okay.
and hopefully it will make more sense. And for now, it's okay. If I have any questions, I'll ask you next time for sure.
Okay, wonderful. You can always bring your questions wherever we are, doesn't matter. I'll answer your questions and
Sure.
so
Sir,
thank you.
my only
Yes.
plan or the question or the help I wanted to have from you
Mm-hmm.
was regarding the profile and everything on the PMI website and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So we would be doing it after the course is done,
No,
or
what you can do is you are talking about filling the PMP application.
yes, sir. Yes.
You can start the process because
Mm-hmm.
this doesn't happen in one day. You start the process, fill in the essential data into the application and
Okay.
save it there. Don't submit it, save it there. and show it to me.
Okay,
If you
sir.
have done something in it, then I will see and I will advise you what to add, what not to add. I'll correct.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you. Because I was asking Ahad, he said just still, stay till the course ends so you have more like, enlightenment. So do it after the course is done.
Well, you can start doing it now. We can finish it by the end of the course and you can submit it immediately.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. See you tomorrow again.
Okay, sir.
Thank you. Take
Thank you, sir. Good night.